Am I dreaming you, or are you dreaming me, Rabbit?
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.
Greetings and salutations. My name is JJ Weinberg. Welcome to my perspective, my dream. I'm an artist. I'm an activist, an alchemist, an author, a radio show host, and I am none of these things. I am a dreamer. I am in a dream. Is this my dream or is this your dream? That's what we're going to try and answer today. That's what we're going to explore. But first, I want to thank Voga Barnes and Denny for their support of this program, the underwriters for perspective. Thank everybody at WVLP. But where do I start? That's always the question. Where do I start? It even takes me back to Alice in Wonderland, one of my books from my notebooks from 2022, when I wrote my first book over these 7 notebooks by hand with a pen on paper. And I think if you go back to the December 13th, Consistency is the Crystal. You can find my episodes on YouTube, but you go to jjweinberg.com/perspective. It'll take you to that YouTube playlist. And you can go back to the December 13th episode and you'll see how things are connected, impossibly connected over my life, over the course of 2 years, 10 years, 25 years. Impossible connections. There have to be what we would call miracles. Scientifically, statistically impossible, but they happen, right? That's what Carl Jung calls synchronicity, the acausal with meaning appearing in our life. And there's one of these notebooks, and I know I mention it because of something phenomenal that happened in that experience. But I remember the question is, how can he finish if he never begins? And it's from Alice in Wonderland. And we'll talk about Alice in Wonderland for sure in this episode. The rabbit, my rabbit painting that was in the museum, the Elkhart Museum of American Art. What does it mean? How do I tell you? I mean, it would take me 47 years to tell you what it means in some capacity. So the question, where do I begin? Do I begin like David Copperfield at the beginning of my beginning? And that's that David Copperfield, but the other David Copperfield influenced my life too. I wanted to be a magician when I was a little boy, and I saw the other David Copperfield at the Radisson in Maryville, Indiana. And now if you go to where I saw David Copperfield, it's an empty dust field. A place that was constructed in imagination and is there in my memories, some of my fondest memories growing up at that place, and it's razed to the ground. There's nothing there. So where do I begin? Do I begin at 451 AD with the Council of Chalcedon? We talked the last couple episodes about Jesus and Rome and all these ideas. The Council of Chalcedon, 451 AD, when Jesus gets defined and framed by empire, doctrine, politics, language, and power. Do I begin at 4:51 p.m. on May 5th, 2008, when I climbed on top of a gas station roof and got arrested because I was trying to make a statement about the world that I was living in? Do I begin at 4:51 p.m. in 1998 when my mom wrote me a letter saying the loan had been approved for my second year of art school that she was trying to get? She was so nervous about it. She said, God bless everything. We got approved for the loan. She was so excited. She wrote that letter and she signed it. And the time on there was 4:51 p.m. 4:51, Council of Chalcedon. Do I begin with my dog, Francis, whose last sunset in LaPorte, Indiana on January 23rd, 2022 was 4:51 p.m.? Do I begin with the song that I recorded when I was 20 years old? I looked down at the clock to try and name this beat that I was making while I was producing. I had this vision. I had a vision that I was writing about my notes themselves, that they were the fire, that they were the burning bush, that they were the light and the fire of truth, and that it would take me forever to go back through my notebooks to even get to that truth. So I could burn them all and it wouldn't matter, that the truth was in the fire. Not burning in the sense of censorship, but burning because the truth was there. Like, if all of the religious books are true, or any of them, the Quran, the Bible, the Torah, the Vedas, anything, if they're true, then we can burn them. Not from censorship. We could literally, if they hold the truth, we should be able to burn them and find the truth alive. And that's what the burning bush means to me. That's what I am, that I am means. But so, do I begin with the song? That I had that vision? I'm writing so fast that I start to sweat. I'm having this vision. I'm listening to the beat that I'm producing. And I'm like, I'm closing my eyes and I have this vision. I'm writing so fast, I start to sweat. And the sweat's dripping down my forehead and it beads up and it turns to blood. And then all of a sudden I'm writing so fast, I'm bleeding this, and the page catches on fire as I'm writing. And then I look up and the roof is on fire. And then the roof completely goes away and the sky is on fire. And I'm writing in the sky with this elvish handwriting. And this is the vision I had. I'm like, this is why the light of this burning is what matters, the truth. I can burn all my notebooks. They can catch fire. At that time, I didn't even know that Fahrenheit 451 was about burning books for censorship sake. But even if you did, the truth in those books you can never burn. It goes back to the last episode where I said, V in V for Vendetta says, behind this mask, behind I am, behind this person, I am a mask. I'm just a character right here in this lifetime. That's what V was saying. Behind this mask is an idea. Jesus, behind this mask is an idea, and ideas are bulletproof. So the truth would still burn. The fire would still burn. The light of that truth would still burn. And so 451, I'm sitting there and I'm writing, I'm thinking about this, and I'm like, before the computer crashes, I want to save this beat and start writing to it. So I save it and I look down at the time. Like, well, I don't know what I'm going to name this thing. I know what I'm looking at and thinking about. I know where this direction is going, the idea of burning and the books and the truth, and that all the political books and all the religious books could go away because the truth is what matters. And so even if all those books were gone, we'd still find the truth. The gnosis would find us through the light. It only stands to reason. Even all of my notebooks, don't worry about going through them. The truth is burning inside of this experience, inside of what I'm saying. So that's what I'm going to write about. I know that's what I'm going to write about. So I look down, I'm like, well, I don't know what to call this song. So I just see the time and it's 4:51 in the morning, 4:51 a.m. So I right click, I save, and I write 4:51. So then I go back to the beat and I start writing the lyrics. 4:51, my notebook's on fire, quotes the higher self, my throat's his amplifier. That's the first lyric that I wrote. Not knowing, again, that 4:51 was the page or the temperature at which a page would incinerate. That's where the title for Fahrenheit 451 comes from. Approximately 451 degrees Fahrenheit is when a page would spontaneously combust. And that was what? A dream? A synchronicity? That was a coincidence? A coincidence that 451 AD is when they somewhat burnt out books like Fahrenheit 451 did around Jesus getting defined by empire. How would that happen? How would I know that? How would that find me through this? Of course, 4:51 p.m. on May 5th, I did it on purpose. Now I seed it. But 4:51 p.m. in 1998, when my mom wrote that letter, that wasn't planned. I didn't even know that it existed yet. It predated my seeing this song and this vision about 2 years later. 2000 is probably around when I wrote that music where I titled it 451. And then you fast forward 22 years to when I lost my dog. Again, follow your dogma, your religion, Chalcedon. The religion and the dogma where we put shackles and handcuffs on this idea, on God. It's on God itself. We put shackles on it, and I say, follow your dogma till you see me in the mirror. Look back at the word and it becomes clear. Look backwards, reflect on it. See, dogma says, am God. My dog Francis, her last sunset was 4:51 p.m. I didn't plan that. So do I begin in Chalcedon at 4:51 AD or 1998 at 4:51 p.m. or at 2000 and 4:51 a.m. when I'm writing this song, or Fahrenheit 4:51? Or do I begin with a dream I had 26 years ago where I saw these paintings in a gallery? I woke up, I was envious of these paintings. I want to do those paintings. I wanted to do those paintings. I was so envious. I'm like, dang it, I want to do paintings like that. But then I only realized after I shook off some of the dust of the night that those were mine. Those paintings only existed inside the gallery of my own subconscious mind. But maybe that's the problem with meaning. It doesn't always move in a straight line. That's why in these last episodes, we've talked about how important it is if empire controls the story. We want time to behave like a ruler, left to right. We think about that. We talk about that. Past, present, future, cause, effect, beginning, middle, end. But Einstein would say there may be something different. The metaphysics and metaphysicians would say something different. Mystics would say something different. And that's not how my life has ever spoken to me. Time doesn't move like a straight line. Time blossoms. It blossoms. It moves more like a tree. Its roots backward into everything that brought you here. It rises into the trunk of this beating heart moment we call now. And it branches outward into all the possible timelines created by every decision that you make. We got here from the roots of so many infinite decisions. This is what we see in the multiverse. And that's why it overlays so specifically with my Bob Ross project. And that's why on October 29th at 4:51 p.m. Eastern Time, I want you to show up to the Million Bob March. You go to happylittlehairdos.com and you show up at the Million Bob March just by simply signing Bob's birthday card. It's a surprise party, so you got to be there at 4:51 p.m. You're showing up to a post. We're hacking the algorithm. We're hacking the dream. We're making a lucid moment where we will break through the zeitgeist and the culture. But if you take that tree, the branches and the roots, you take that tree and you turn it, pull it up out of the ground. If you look at the roots and the branches and the trunk as one living structure, you start to see something closer to where we could put a spiral cone. If you go to the extremities of all the branches and all the roots, and then you come back down to the point of now, you see you can make a cone in a three-dimensional shape. The cone would envelop these roots and these branches. And then if you graft time on that spiral going around that cone, that's where I have this idea that the golden ratio and the divine proportion is experienced through a life, through our space-time experience. Because if a painting, if music, if nature is following this idea of the golden ratio, the divine proportion, the way that these things are related, the parts to the greater, if that's following it, why wouldn't it stand to reason that it happens in our life, in our space-time experience? And that's what I feel like serendipity is, that we can actually measure it potentially. That's why I say your life is a canvas stretched across the time that you have here. The bars of time are the stretcher bars. Your choices are the brush strokes. Your decisions are the painting. And whether you know it or not, you're making a masterpiece. Or you're letting someone else paint it for you, which is why Viktor Frankl says a human being is a deciding being. Decide. Those are your strokes. And Bob says it's okay. Make some happy accidents. Carl Jung called synchronicity an acausal connecting principle. In other words, not everything meaningful comes to you through simple cause and effect. Sometimes a symbol arrives. Sometimes a number follows you, like 451 has for me. Sometimes a dream comes back 26 years later wearing a different mask. Sometimes a rabbit shows up in a painting before you even understand the rabbit. Sometimes a red tomato on top of a refrigerator turns out to be your Red King in Alice in Wonderland. Sometimes the thing that seemed absurd, childish, forgotten, or random comes back with teeth, with roots, with light inside of it. And the question isn't, can I prove this to someone who has already decided meaning is impossible? The question is, what happens when I stop dismissing the pattern long enough to ask what it's trying to say? Because 26 years ago, I had this dream, or this waking realization after a dream, where I understood that everyone I met inside of the dream was me. If I saw my mom in the dream, she was my mind's version of my mom. She didn't have agency. She was a puppet of my subconscious. If I saw Mickey Mouse, he was my mind's version of Mickey Mouse. If I saw a stranger, they were still being animated by my own subconscious. And then I woke up into what we call real life, where you're hearing this radio broadcast right now, or you're listening to this podcast. And I started asking what some would say is a dangerous question. It puts us on the fringe. What if this layer of our waking life works the same way? Not in a cheap, self-centered way. Not in a way like lazy, solipsistic way. Solipsism is the philosophical idea that the only thing I know with certainty is my own experience, which I feel like that's the only thing we do know. But I'm not trying to turn it into ego. I'm not saying only I exist and everything else is fake. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that I am the only real one. I'm saying that I am is the only real one. The Red King is the dreamer, the sleeper. Exodus 3:14, I am that I am. I am saying maybe each of us is standing at the center of an ever-expanding universe of experience. I mean, if the universe expands infinitely, then you're always at the center, and I am always at the center. And maybe every other person you meet standing at the center of theirs, their perspective. So I said to my friend Tony, as we're talking about this, I'm waking up from this dream, I don't know that you exist outside of my existence or my experience of you. But maybe I'm not the dreamer and you're my dream figure. Maybe I'm the dream figure in your dream, trying to get you to wake up, to become lucid. What happens when you become lucid? When you become lucid, you realize that you're an actor wearing a mask and that you're on a stage, and that now all of your choices are going to shape this story. You are the screenwriter. So that's why I said to Tony years ago in my mom's kitchen, we were both in art school. We're talking about this dream that I'd woken up from and all these different things, reality, perception, whether this life that we're experiencing and talking through might be another layer of dreaming. And I said, maybe this isn't my dream. Maybe it's your dream. But I said, you don't exist outside of my experience of you. I'm 20, maybe 19 years old saying this to him, right? And then I said, but then again, you don't know that I exist outside of your experience of me. So maybe I'm just a dream figure in your dream. Fast forward a couple of years, I would hear that in a trailer for a movie called Waking Life. Somebody saying that maybe I'm just a dream figure in your dream. And it freaked me out, to say the least. I find a book from Neville Goddard, Awaken from the Dream, and it's saying some of these exact same things. And it would send shivers up my spine. To this day, it still does. Because where would I have received that from? How are we having this same reception? I didn't have like an earthly experience of reading these things or knowing these things. It was the same with Alice in Wonderland. But so I said to Tony, I said, maybe this isn't my dream. Maybe it isn't your dream. Maybe that red tomato pitcher on top of the fridge is dreaming us both. We were, again, at my mom's house, there's this vegetable tray, and at the center was this big red tomato that was like a juice pitcher that you could fill up. And I said, maybe that red tomato on the fridge is dreaming us both. And at that time, it was just me grasping for what this could be. A red tomato on top of the fridge. But decades later, I come to this experience with Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, and I find the Red King. I mean, honestly, I didn't find it through Alice. I found it through Rainn Wilson and his show, his podcast, Soul Boom. And I found that through a art piece collaboration that I did with Val Kilmer over his God panels and my dog tag, God tag, because I had a show in LA that I had to fly out when I was flying out to LA to do this show for this Val Kilmer collaboration, that I was going to find a book, and I stumble upon Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom. And then that led me to the podcast where I just recently literally heard the guy talk about the Red King, because I haven't read Alice in Wonderland. I haven't read Lewis Carroll to that depth, but I've been having these incredible connections. The notion of Through the Looking Glass. I have that line in a lyric where I'm talking about being outside of time. I've probably mentioned it here on the show before. I'll go through the verse. It's from, again, somewhere around 2000, around this time when I'm having these dreams and things, and talking about being outside of time, that time ain't no father of mine. I created him within the rhythm of my rhyme. And the lyric for this verse says, peep my reflection. The present slips from detection, perfection lost in the past, too fast for our perception. Kept in deception till I fashion myself a weapon. And through the looking glass of recollection, I recall my connection. Divine complexion, see my body in time as a contrasting projection, but in unified mind I find resurrection, everlasting life and God's light directing. That verse came to me. I didn't write that verse. But that notion that I say, and through the looking glass of recollection. I wasn't talking about Alice at that time. I didn't even know or think about Alice. And it was a double meaning for me when I wrote it, because I was saying, did I fashion myself a weapon through the looking glass, looking at the mirror, looking at the reflection of am God, of dogma to see I am God? Or did I throw the mirror and shatter it? Did I throw it through the looking glass to create a weapon like Atreyu in the Neverending Story, when Gamork and the nothing is coming after me and I say, come for me, Gamork, for I am Atreyu. And I needed a piece of a mirror, that shattered mirror, to stab the beast of nothingness in the heart. To then realize that I was actually the little boy reading the story. I was Bastion, and I had to give the childlike empress a name because I had to lean into imagination, the same imagination that Bob Ross says that we have at the back of us, the same land of make-believe that Mr. Rogers talks about. And then you wonder why I think these things are important, why I want you at the Million Bob March in my dream. That's my dream. I don't need 1 million people at the National Mall. 10,000 Bobs would be amazing. 1,000 Bobs would be amazing. 100 Bobs would be amazing. But I think we could get 1 million Bobs in the Bobberverse, in the metaverse, in the dream, to sign Bob's birthday card at 4:51 p.m. Eastern Time, October 29th, Bob's birthday. Be there. Sign up for it. You're going to be a part of this dream. And we'll realize that this collective unconscious, this crazy thing, is all feeding itself. So I find this idea that Alice might be part of the Red King's dream. Just listening to a podcast a couple of days ago. Rainn Wilson interviewing a guest, and then the end question becomes, who dreamed it? Was it Alice? Was it the king? Was it both? It was like he dreamed me or I had dreamed him, and then they looked at each other and said, or who dreamed us all? That's literally the question I asked 26 years ago, waking up from a dream, to Tony in the kitchen of the place we were staying at with my mom with the red tomato on the fridge. And that was the Red King. That's, I'm telling you, it's impossible. It's beautiful. It's magical. When I saw that, when I heard him say that, the red tomato on the fridge had been waiting there for 26 years to tell me it was the Red King all along. So that's why Alice matters. The rabbit matters. Not because I grew up some Lewis Carroll scholar. I didn't even read it. Like a lot of people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, Alice was somewhere in the background, Disney. You know, the rabbit, the Tea Party, the Mad Hatter, the absurdity, the Looking Glass. But I didn't know how deeply it had already been woven through me. I didn't know that the rabbit in my painting was part of that and part of the Matrix and Neo and Chinese folklore. The lucky rabbit's foot, the severed luck, the idea of making your own luck by what I call myself a wizard of intentional serendipity, naming the serendipity the same way that Bastian had to name the childlike empress in the never-ending story, then expecting it. The red string, how it connects with the Kabbalah, the Red King, the red string and the Red King, the dreamer, the mirror, the reversal, the wordplay, the absurdity that somehow has its own logic. I didn't know all of it was waiting for me. I didn't know that when I wrote the lyrics 26 years ago about looking at my reflection and the present slipping from detection. I was already writing through the looking glass. I didn't know then when I said it, follow your dogma till you see me in the mirror, look back at the word and it becomes clear. I was already playing with the reversal of God and dog, man's best friend. I ams, food for thought, nutrition, I ams. There's actually a dog food company called I ams and I am, of dogma and am God, of the sacred trapped inside the backward spell. And that takes us to the word as spell, the word as code, the word as creation. In the beginning was the word, Heka, magic language coded. Large language models. We talk about artificial intelligence on here all the time. That's just the word, language, the matrix, Neo seeing the code, Zion under attack. Now Zionist under attack. What does all this mean? There's so many layers, so much magic for us to look into if we don't get stuck just blazing by things. The spoken word becoming flesh. Exodus 3:14, I am that I am. That line isn't theology to me. It's spiritual technology. It's a declaration of being. It's I am lucid. It's the moment that the actor wakes up on stage and realizes he's wearing a mask. And then he looks around and he realizes the camera. He sees the camera out there. And then he realizes he's the director. And the director, he has to obey the director. But then it's like, wait a second. He's the screenwriter and the casting agent and the audience. And then above that, he realizes that it's all happening inside of dream. That's why my Val Kilmer project, that's what it's about. It's the idea that I'm your Huckleberry Finn. Finn being the finale, Val's final speaking role. The actor's role is greater than the sum of his parts. We begin in spirit, become physical, and return to spirit. That's what this project says, this dog tag that I wear every day around my neck. We begin digital with the project. It becomes physical, then it returns to the digital. The blockchain becomes a kind of digital Akashic record. Not because technology replaces spirit, but because technology can become an allegory for what the spirit has always been doing, recording, remembering, carving names into the tree of life. And Val's God panels became my dog tag, my God tag, because I had a dream. Val was too sick physically to work on the canvases. He was not feeling well. So I had to ask myself, how do I collaborate with someone across space and time? It's something that a lyric that I wrote 26 years ago answered. Then the answer again came in a dream. My God panel, it looks like a dog tag, a God tag, a dog tag, man's best friend, God and dog in the mirror, the circumpunct in the center, the alchemical sun, the self as seen by Jung, the source. So I sculpted and 3D printed a stencil from Val's stencil that he spray painted everything that he spray painted through so that his hand, his image, his spiritual mark could come through mine. 3D printed it, the technology again. It's like I am. Here it is, Exodus 3:14 through a 3D printer. So I sculpted, 3D printed it, and then I spray paint through it. And then later, I'm at this opening in LA. I'm talking about the motivation between Jung and dreams and symbols. And someone comes up to me and he tells me, it's absolutely incredible. He says, this is gonna blow your mind. He's like, first of all, this is incredible. And everything you're saying, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, all these connections and the serendipity and all the stuff. And he says, we helped Val develop this Mark Twain stage play through Jungian dream analysis. I was like, you've got to be, I'm talking about Jung. I'm like, come on, man. At some point, the impossibility stacked on impossibility becomes its own language. And that's what I call serendipity. But even the notion that the Mark Twain connection between Val and I, there is a quote on my website that says, J.J. Weinberg is Mark Twain with the paintbrush. That was part of my Wizard of Intentional Serendipity. I put that quote there from an art critic about my work on purpose. And it led me to literally being in Val's studio, being in Val's office, seeing these God panels, and being invited to help create some of his first work on the blockchain, and then rolled into this project. But I know how that sounds. I know the edge of it. I know there's a thin line between madness and enlightenment, although I don't know that they would look that much different to people on the outside. But I know someone can hear this, I know, and say it's delusional. But Viktor Frankl will go back to the notion that between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose. That space is our freedom. That space is our humanity. That space is where we decide whether we're just reacting like automatons or whether we're awake enough to participate, whether we're lucid. That's the lucid moment. That's the I am. That's the place where the dream stops being something happening to you and becomes something that you're responsible for and inside of. It's happening through you instead of to you. Not controlling everything, not pretending pain isn't real, not pretending death, grief, cruelty, empire, propaganda, anti-Semitism that I've been experiencing the past month or so here for making some comments and some questions. I'm hit with full force anti-Semitism and see some of the ugliest things that you can imagine. But deciding what role you're going to play when you become conscious of the stage. So that's why we move from Alice to the Matrix, from Jung and the archetype to Bob Ross, from Val Kilmer to 451, from the red king to the red string, from dreams to the algorithm, because the algorithm is another dream system. It's another projection. It's another mirror. We blame the algorithm like it's some evil God outside of us, but the algorithm feeds on our attention. It feeds on fear, outrage, tribal identity, insult, and reaction, because that's what we keep giving it. Currency flows where attention goes. We've said this before. Currency as money, currency as electricity, current as movement, energy, flow. The algorithm isn't separate from us. It's a technological mirror of our collective attention. So stop blaming the algorithm. Let's hack the algorithm. Brings me back to October 29th again. Bob's birthday, 4:51 p.m. Eastern Time. Million Bob March. You can show up in Washington dressed up as Bob. You can organize a Bob mob wherever you are, or you can just show up inside the Bobberverse by going to happylittlehairdos.com. I need you to sign that surprise birthday party, surprise birthday card, though, for Bob's birthday party. I believe in imagination. I believe in PBS. And I think we believe all collectively in the moral imagination that Bob Ross and Fred Rogers represented. And because Bob said you can move mountains, you know, that's an extension of the joy of protesting, the algorithm for joy. Jesus said you can move mountains. The Matrix says wake up, see the code. Alice says follow the rabbit. Jung says pay attention to the symbol. Frankl says choose your response. Val says I don't believe in death. And I'm saying your life is a canvas. Your identity is a role. Your words are spells. Your attention is currency. The dream becomes dangerous only when you don't know you're dreaming. But when you become lucid, you wake up inside the story. When you realize the mask is a mask, the role is a role, the frame is a frame, the algorithm is a mirror, then you can paint differently, you can speak differently, you can choose differently, and you can show up differently. So maybe I'm the dreamer. Maybe you are. Maybe we're both dreaming and being dreamed by the Red King. Maybe the Red King is the red tomato on the fridge. Maybe the rabbit is never random. Maybe 451 was never just a number. I talked about Fred Rogers on the last episode. 143 was his number. It was 143 because he would weigh himself every day and he always weighed 143 pounds. And then he said, well, what does that mean? So he took it and he turned the meaning into a phrase. 143, 1, I. 4, love. 3, you. 4 letters in love, 3 letters in you, 1 in I love you is 143. So for me, I was like, wow, when I saw that immediately, I was writing my book in 2022, Serendipity According to Francis, and I had already had this 20-year arc of 451 experiences. And I'm like, man, what does that mean for me then? Well, the 4 definitely has to be love, as it is for Fred Rogers. So it came to me immediately. Love opens I. The I singular I am. It opens us. So maybe the red string through my life isn't proof in a courtroom sense, but in a mythic sense. Maybe the point is not to convince the dead-eyed skeptic who's already decided the world is flat, literal, mechanical, and empty. Maybe the point is to speak to the part of you that already knows there's more going on here than we're allowed to say out loud. Maybe the point is to wake up inside the dream and ask, what am I going to paint with the time I have left? I know this is a lot. I know I'm moving through Val Kilmer, Bob Ross, Alice in Wonderland, Carl Jung, The Matrix, 451, Soul Boom, Jesus, the Red King, the Rabbit, the algorithm, the blockchain, the Akashic Record, dreams, public media, anti-Semitism, Rome, dogma, masks, and mirrors. That has to sound like madness if you're trying to hear it as a straight line. But that's the whole point. It's not a straight line. This is the red string. This is the spiral. This is the thread. This is the dream logic that only looks absurd until you follow it all the way through. That's what hit me when I'm listening to Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom podcast. This episode, they're talking about Jesus. The question is about interpretations and understanding of Jesus, but they land on Alice in Wonderland. I wasn't clicking the episode to listen about Alice. That's what I'm saying. But these deeper spiritual questions that get into Lewis Carroll and Through the Looking Glass, the Red King, who's dreaming who. And when they go into the Red King asleep, it just took me right back to all of this stuff. Maybe the red tomato pitcher on top of the refrigerator is dreaming us both. It sounds absurd, but again, Lewis Carroll was talking in absurdity. Sounds like a joke, but does God not have humor? That's what I'm saying. It sounds like 2 kids in art school in the kitchen talking way too late into the night. But then it circles back 26 years later. And I don't know what you do with that. I don't know how you make that small enough to fit inside someone else's acceptable category. But that's why when people ask me, what does this painting of the rabbit mean? Seduction of the rabbit. What does it mean? I said, well, how long do you have? This could take me 47 years to tell you what it means. It goes back to all these dreams. The stage. I have this vision. I was auditioning. I've talked about it here before. I'm pretty sure I'm on stage and I'm performing for people out in the dark. I couldn't see them. I was trying to get the role, though. I knew that. And I was trying to become what they wanted me to be as this actor. And then the lights came on. And when the lights came on, I saw who I'd been auditioning for. It was the casting agent, the director, and it was the screenwriter. Those were who were deciding whether I got the part, what the story was. But then I looked as they came clear in the light and realized they were all me. That's the dream. That's the mask. That's the role. I was the actor, but I was also the one who cast myself. I was the director telling myself how to move, but I was the screenwriter writing the lines. And then above all that, I was the dreamer, dreaming the whole theater. And that's what it felt like when I did my screening for the I'm Your Huckleberry Finn piece. When we did it inside of a theater, I felt like this is my dream. These are the paintings that I dreamt up 26 years ago. But that's what I mean when I say identity is a performance. Not in a shallow way, not that it's fake, that it has no meaning, but theater is powerful because it reveals meaning through the mask. Persona means mask. And the problem isn't that we wear masks. The problem is that we forget that we're wearing them. And that's what the Val project was about. Val understood the mask. He understood the role. He was Doc Holliday. He was Jim Morrison. He was Mark Twain. He was himself. And the actor's role becomes greater than the sum of its parts, of his parts, because the mask becomes a portal. That's why I called the piece I'm Your Huckleberry ... Finn with one N, meaning finality. So how do you work with someone across space and time? That was a question I had to answer. The circumpunct in the center of my dog tag. And then I come back to this rabbit painting. What does it mean? Okay, what's this? What am I looking at? How much time do you have? The rabbit is an invitation. It's a warning. The rabbit shows up as the thing we follow. I wrote about the rabbit all through Serendipity, according to Francis. It showed up as a white Tesla. You have to read the book to get to it. But that's Alice, the white rabbit, falling through the hole into a world that looks absurd until you realize the absurdity has a logic of its own. That's also the Matrix. Follow the white rabbit. Of course, the white rabbit in the Matrix is flowing from Alice. The signal that tells Neo there's another layer to reality, another frame behind the frame, another system behind the life that he thought he was living. And that is what this rabbit became for me. It's not just an image, it's a visitation, the seduction of the rabbit. There's depth in the symbol that's carried that I don't have enough time to tell you. I painted the rabbit and realize even later that it's visiting me through these different modes. The memento mori, the skull that's there on the canvas, through bloodlines, through time, through the question of whether we're awake inside our own lives. That's why there's a red string around its paw, its left paw. It matters. It's not decoration. I have the same red string tied around my actual wrist. It's like a bloodline. As if you were to sever the foot, that's where the blood would flow from the rabbit's foot. But it's tying one thing to another through serendipity, generation, one generation to another, one life to another, one dream to another. It's the string that you follow when you don't always know the map, the thread through the labyrinth. It's this connection across space and time, and Kabbalah and mysticism and folk traditions and all these different symbolic languages. The red string carries protection, fate, binding, connection, the unseen thread between people and events. It's what I'm talking about. It's what's happening in my dreams and my waking life. It's the thing that you might dismiss as superstition until it shows up too much, with too much precision to ignore. I always love to come back to Carl Jung because he's embracing synchronicity as more of a scientific principle than, just some sort of willy-nilly tree-hugging new ageness. Because I know when I say all these things, even when I talk about 451, if you can't see it in such a way, it says, all these connections are stacked on top of each other, and someone can say, you're just seeing patterns. But that's what consciousness does. Consciousness sees patterns. The question is whether the pattern is dead or alive. The question is whether it produces ego or humility, delusion or responsibility, paralysis or action. So again, Frankl, the space between stimulus and response is our freedom. And that space is where the dream becomes lucid. It's where we stop reacting like automatons and become deciding beings. And lucidity is a decision. It's a space where you decide whether the symbol will own you or whether you'll work with it. Where you realize that the mask is a mask, the role is a role, and that the script can be revised. So as I was writing these notes and thinking about everything, at one point in the process, I walked away. I'm talking about dreams, thinking about dreams, and over 26 years, dreams from 26 years ago, how they informed my art in a very specific way. Lyrics to songs reappeared 26 years later. And then the precision of time. I'm talking about dreams. I'm walking to the bathroom. And as I get into an earshot of the radio, I hear, these dreams go on when I close my eyes. Every second of the night, I live another life. Heart, these dreams. The precision was impeccable. I mean, and it's a song I knew. I didn't know all the lyrics, so I'd never really studied it. I knew that part of the song, though, of course. These dreams go on when I close my eyes. And then I look at the lyrics and I see the full moon over dreams in the mist. And I think about my painting that I'd been writing about for these notes. I see searching for a time on a watch with no hands. And I think about my song from 26 years ago, Children Timeless. I'm sitting there with my rabbit painting, with the moon, with time, with dreams, and a reflection and the present slipping from detection. And it's me trying to describe time before I had language for it. To describe this moment. That by the time that you see a star, so this is what I was talking about in that language for Children Timeless. Realizing that they say that by the time you see a star, that star may already be gone. Because of its proximity to us. It's so far away that even at the speed of light, by the time the light hits your eye and is processed through your brain and your perception through your cornea and everything, that star is already gone. So you're looking at the past. And that's where that lyric came from me for Children Timeless. That by the time the light leaves your eye and face and hits the mirror and returns to your eye and gets processed by your own brain, the now that you think you're seeing is already past. You're looking at the past when you look at your reflection. Your reflection, even in the mirror, is a memory. Even the mirror is showing you the past. So when I say through the looking glass of recollection, is it through the looking glass like Alice? Is it the mirror of memory? Is it breaking the mirror and fashioning myself a weapon? Atreyu facing Gamork? Is it the I am? Is it the word? Is it the reflection? Yes. All of it. That's how symbol works. It doesn't flatten into one meaning. It radiates, it refracts, it becomes the crystal. So I'm listening to Rainn Wilson's Soul Boom podcast because I'm asking questions about Jesus, Paul, Christianity, Rome, Zionism, anti-Zionism, anti-Semitism, the swastika, the Vedas, Buddhism, the Eightfold Path, how symbols get stolen, reframed, weaponized, misunderstood. I'm talking about all of this here. I'm asking how stories become systems and how systems become prisons. I'm asking in the last few episodes whether Rome ever actually left or whether Rome learned to live inside language, law, religion, empire, propaganda, and spectacle. I'm asking how Jesus becomes something Jesus wouldn't recognize. I'm asking how a tradition becomes dogma and how dogma turns around in the mirror and says, am God. And then through that exact search, the algorithm and everything, I get pulled back to Alice, to the Red King, to waking dreams, to the idea that Lewis Carroll was playing with dream states. That reversal, the identity in a way that overlays almost exactly onto the questions I've been carrying since I was just a little boy, watching the never-ending story. So that's serendipity, not as Hallmark greeting card fluff, not as everything happens for a reason in a way that just erases suffering. It's serendipity as disciplined attention. Serendipity as the willingness to write it down, follow the thread, compare the symbols, and let meaning blossom. That's why my book, Serendipity According to Francis, the mystical memoir of a man and his dog, the autobiography of an alchemist, that's why it's not just Francis as my dog. She's part of my spiritual technology. Dog, God, I am, dogma in the mirror. Her last sunset being 4:51 p.m. It's not something I can just shrug off. It's part of the thread, part of the red string. So when you ask, what is this painting of the rabbit? There it is. And then I come back to Bob Ross. It's not separate from this. Bob is one of the masks. He's one of the archetypes. Bob's hair is the symbol. Without the hair, is he Bob? No. Change the hair and Bob becomes another timeline. That's what Happy Hairdos says. Happy Little Hairdos, the Bobberverse. It's a joke, but the joke has depth. The absurd is meant to bring us into the question. Put long hair and a crown of thorns, and Bob becomes the patron saint of paint. Put the right haircut and glasses on him, black turtleneck, and he becomes Steve Jobs. The face is the same, but the mask changes somehow because of the archetype, because of how we see. And that's what I'm saying about Jesus, about Val, about Neo, Alice, about V for Vendetta, and Anonymous. We are Legion. About all of us. It's how, when I went searching for a post, I was making a post for the 5th of November. Remember the 5th of November. And I'm looking up something about B for Vendetta, Bob. I can't remember the year. It might have been 2022 as well. And I'm looking up Legion. We are Legion. And I remember all of the masks at the end of the movie showing up to a political event. And the idea that there's an idea behind the mask that's bulletproof. I was like, man, that's Bob for me. And this was before I even thought of the Million Bob March, because it was before there was a challenge to erase public media. So I didn't even have that line drawn in the sand, painted in the sand, if you will. But I remember I wanted to make a post about We Are Legion and We Are Bob. So I was looking for quotes from V for Vendetta, November 5th. And I was going to do Bob with the fro with the V for Vendetta mask on. And I looked up We Are Legion because I was thinking it was V for Vendetta, but it wasn't. It was the notion that Anonymous, the hacker group, used the Guy Fawkes mask for their symbology for the same reason that it's in the V for Vendetta movie. And I'm like, oh, so I look up We Are Legion, right? Because there was a documentary film about Anonymous called We Are Legion, and that's like one of their statements. And then as I look up We Are Legion, and I'm looking up Bob Ross, I come to this science fiction novel. Mind you, this is, I think maybe 2000, might have been 2023. And I stumble on this science fiction novel called We Are Legion, We Are Bob. It's absolutely unbelievable. I'm like, what is this? He literally calls his thing the Bobberverse almost the same way I spell it. I call mine the Bobberverse, Bobber verse. Just like I talk about the Bobber Shop instead of the Barber Shop, where this is metaphysical place where we change timelines. We change our hair, and by changing our hair, we change our timeline. We change our identity, and we go to a whole different world, just like Bob did with his afro. And in this, I end up stumbling on this book, We Are Legion, We Are Bob. And it's an AI that creates a bunch of Bobs, not Bob Ross, but this sci-fi character through artificial intelligence, through this simulation of AI Bobs. And I find it, and it overlaps almost one-to-one with my Bobberverse in the notion of the Afronaut Alliance and the Bobs that I have that got lost in space. It's Commander Buzz Ross. It's absolutely absurd. It's absolutely absurd. It's all parody. It's all jokes. It's all sci-fi on one level. But then underneath it, it's like, man, how profound is this? Like, what are these connections? I know that you've had these experiences in your life. You might be having some of them right now. You might look down and say, oh my God, it's 4:51 p.m. right now. If you looked at your clock, it might be 4:51 when you're listening to this. You might have just accidentally, serendipitously stumbled upon that. But now I'm seeding it. Bob's birthday, 4:51 p.m. Eastern time. You can show up in DC dressed as Bob, or you can show up in the Bobberverse. HappyLittleHairdos.com. I need you to sign Bob's birthday card because I believe in public media. It helped bring me to this. I believe in imagination. I believe in creativity. I believe in the moral compass of Bob Ross and Fred Rogers. I believe that me hearing Schoolhouse Rock, I'm Just a Bill, brought me to the question of whether civic imagination matters and what it means, and that I could maybe write a bill myself as an artist. I believe that protest doesn't only have to be rage. We can get into the joy of protesting. It can be absurdity. It can be beauty. It can be a Bob mob. So the synthesis of it all is that we live inside stories. But most people forget that they're stories. Even your own life, it's a story that you're telling yourself, and you will manifest it. You have to be careful because religion can become dogma. Politics becomes kayfabe. The algorithm becomes a prison. Identity becomes a mask that we forget that we're wearing. And then symbols become weapons when we stop understanding them. But when you become conscious inside the story, the prison becomes a canvas. The algorithm becomes a tool. The dream becomes lucid. The mask becomes a portal. And the rabbit becomes an invitation. So the red king becomes my red tomato on the fridge, and the red string becomes the bloodline of meaning connecting every impossible point in Indra's net. 4:51 becomes not just a number, but a bell ringing through time. Maybe I'm the dreamer. Maybe you are. Maybe we're both being dreamed by the red king, and maybe the red king is the tomato on the fridge. Because if I'm a dream figure in your dream, then let me say it clearly before I leave the scene. Wake up.
Am I dreaming you? Or are you dreaming me? Rabbit.
Perception is reality. Perspective shapes the world around you. I'm JJ Weinberg, and this is my perspective.